Strange, isn't it? How the body can whisper for weeks, and no one hears it. You wake up, same bed, same sun through the window, same dull pressure behind your eyes, the kind you tell yourself is just from sleeping wrong. But something feels off. Maybe your hand doesn't move quite the way it should. Maybe a word gets stuck on your tongue, just for a moment, and then it passes. So you keep going, because that's what we do. We brush it off. Blame the stress, the bad sleep, the weather. We get good at explaining things away, even when our body is quietly waving a red flag, a mini stroke. That's what we call it. But there's nothing mini about it. Not really. It's like the creak in a wooden beam before the roof caves in. A warning, not a tragedy yet, but close. The medical term is Transient Ischemic Attack. Transient, because it passes. Ischemic, because a part of your brain didn't get enough blood. Just for a moment. A moment too short to be noticed, but long enough to change everything. If ignored, you don't fall to the floor. There's no drama. No ambulance sirens. Instead, your hand fumbles with your keys. You forget a name, not just any name, your child's teacher. You feel dizzy for 5 seconds. And then, you're fine. That's the danger. It's not scary enough to stop you. Not loud enough to alert anyone. Just quiet cracks in the foundation. I've seen it too many times. People sitting across from me, eyes tired, voice calm. Doc, I think I just got too tired that day. It only lasted a few minutes. I didn't want to make a fuss. They wait, and sometimes the next time, it doesn't pass. Sometimes it comes back as a full stroke. And then the words don't come back. Or the hands don't work. Same, or they don't walk out of the hospital at all. The thing is, these warning signs, they rarely scream. They tap your shoulder in the middle of a busy day. A slurred word. A moment of confusion. A crooked smile in the mirror you don't notice. And by the time you do, it might be too late. But here's the part no one tells you. It's not just about recognizing the signs. It's about the life you live before they come. The way you carry your stress. The nights you trade for work. The salt you stop noticing in every meal. The silence in your body when your pressure rises and rises. And no one feels a thing. Your blood vessels don't scream. They stretch. They strain. They swell in silence. Health doesn't collapse in a day. It unravels. Like a thread, pulled slowly from the inside. And you keep walking. Keep smiling. Keep telling yourself you're fine, until you're not. I'm not here to scare you. I've seen enough fear in hospital rooms to know it doesn't help much. What helps is awareness, stillness. The kind that comes when you finally listen, not to the noise, but to the absence of it, the quiet warnings, the subtle changes, the truth you already feel, deep down, because the body always tells the truth. And if you're very still, if you stop rushing just for a moment, you might hear it whisper, something's not right. It doesn't always look dramatic. A mini-stroke rarely makes headlines. It doesn't stop traffic. No one rushes in with a stretcher. Most times, you're still standing. You might even smile. But something, small, strange, has shifted. Reach for a cup and your fingers miss it. You try to say a word and it comes out wrong. You look in the mirror and your smile pulls slightly to one side, but only for a few seconds, and then everything returns to normal. Almost, that's how it hides. A woman once told me, I thought I was just tired. I was washing dishes and my hand went numb. It came back after a minute, so I didn't think much of it. She was 58, healthy on the outside. Strong even, she gardened. She walked every morning, but that numbness, just one hand, just for a minute, was the body's quiet alarm. And 2 weeks later, when she collapsed folding laundry, it was already too late. See, the brain doesn't send pain signals like a muscle does. When your leg cramps, you feel it. When your heart beats fast, you notice. But the brain, it simply stops working for a few seconds, a few minutes, and then resumes as if nothing happened. But in that pause, something gets missed. A signal doesn't reach the arm. A word doesn't reach the mouth. A thought disappears before you can speak it, and the world keeps turning, you might say. I felt dizzy for just a moment. My vision went blurry, but then it cleared. I had trouble speaking, just once, then it was gone. So you go back to your day, but the truth is, the body never does something for no reason, not at that age. Not in that way. We've grown too good at minimizing. You think, it's stress, it's age, it's probably just dehydration. And maybe, sometimes it is. But when it happens more than once, when you feel your body disconnecting, even slightly, that's not stress. That's not nothing. That's your brain saying, I need help now. I once asked a man, when did it start? He stared at the floor for a while, then said, if I'm honest, about a month ago, I had trouble reading my watch. The numbers blurred. It happened twice. I didn't want to seem dramatic. He smiled when he said that. But behind that smile, there was regret. Not fear, regret. Because deep down, he knew. We're taught to push through, to downplay, to stay strong, to wait until it gets worse before we do anything about it. But mini strokes don't play by those rules. They don't give second chances easily. Sometimes they come once, sometimes twice, and then they bring their bigger brother. The one you can't walk away from. So let me say this as plainly as I can. If your speech slurs, even once, and you're not tired or drinking, if your arm or face feels numb, even briefly, if you can't see clearly out of one eye for just a few minutes, if your balance suddenly leaves you, that's not just tiredness. That's not aging. That might be a mini stroke. It passes quickly, but what it leaves behind is risk. A warning. A moment that asks for your attention. And the choice is always yours, to listen now, or regret it later. It's not just the moment. It's the years leading to it. A mini stroke doesn't appear from nowhere. It's the end of a quiet build-up, one that starts in places we barely notice. Like a coffee cup, a skipped breakfast, a night of poor sleep, a sigh that never fully leaves the chest. You don't think much of it. You wake up late, skip the morning meal, grab something salty for lunch just to get through the day. Stay up scrolling, because it's the only time you're alone. You tell yourself it's just this season, just this week, just until things calm down, but they don't, and you keep going. The truth is, most strokes don't begin in the hospital. They begin in the kitchen, at the dining table, in the silence between long days and short nights. Not enough water, too much processed food, that extra pinch of salt, the blood pressure you never check because you feel fine. I once knew a man who prided himself on never seeing a doctor. Strong as an ox, he'd say, laughing. He was. Until he wasn't. One morning he stood up from the couch and fell sideways. His wife thought he was joking, but half his face didn't move. And neither did his right hand. He had been living with high blood pressure for years, silently. Never felt a thing, because pressure doesn't knock on your door. It rises slowly, invisibly, like water behind a dam, until one day it breaks. We often imagine sickness as something we can feel, a pain, a fever, a sharp, clear signal, but the deadliest things are often the quietest. Like plaque building in the arteries, like tension behind the eyes, like pressure creeping through fragile vessels in the brain. That's why I always say, it's not about panic. It's about presence. Notice how your body responds after certain meals. Notice the nights when your heartbeat feels different. Notice when your legs swell, or your memory slips, or you lose your balance more than once. That's not just aging. That's your body asking for less noise and more care. We live in a world that rewards pushing through. Late nights, skipping meals, ignoring fatigue. But the body doesn't forget. Every missed signal, every silent spike in pressure, every restless night, it remembers. And one day, when you're not paying attention, it speaks all at once. No. One plans for a stroke. It's not a date you mark on the calendar, but every small choice either brings you closer or buys you a little more time. And the difference between those two directions is often something as simple as water, as stillness, as sleep. Your body is not asking for perfection. It's asking to be seen, to be heard, to be taken seriously before it fails, because when it finally breaks, it won't be gentle. It doesn't always come with panic, or loud arguments, or tears. Sometimes, stress is quiet. It sits behind your eyes, in the tightness of your shoulders, in the way your breath stays shallow even when nothing's wrong, in how you sigh without knowing why. You go through the motions, hold everything together, smile when expected, but inside, something is clenched. And it's been clenched for a long time. I met a woman once, early 50s. Worked 2 jobs, raised her son alone. She came in because her hand had gone numb while driving. Only for a minute. She brushed it off, but when I asked about her life, she paused, then said, almost laughing, I haven't slept properly in years. I wake up thinking about bills. I eat whatever's left. And I feel guilty even sitting still. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. She didn't know. She never felt it. Because stress doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just stays. And slowly, it changes the way your heart beats, the way your blood flows, the way your vessels age. You may think you're managing. You may think you're doing fine. But your body keeps score. It remembers every time you skipped rest. Every time your jaw stayed tight through a meeting. Every moment you swallowed frustration or kept going when your body said stop. And over time, your brain stops getting what it needs. Oxygen, blood, peace. They've studied it. How stress raises pressure quietly. How it thickens the blood. How it inflames the inner walls of your arteries. It's not in your head. It's in your heart, your vessels, your brain. And the damage isn't loud, it's slow. Like water wearing down stone, but no one sees it. Because you keep showing up. Keep doing what needs to be done. You're the strong one, the responsible one, the one who never complains. Until one day, you can't form the words. You can't feel your arm. You're staring at your phone, and you don't remember who you were about to call. People think the brain just breaks, but it doesn't. It bends slowly under years of quiet strain, until something gives, a tiny clot, a brief blockage, A pause in blood flow that seems to last only seconds, but changes everything. This isn't about fear. It's about truth. The kind of truth you only hear in silence, in still moments. When the body finally speaks after years of being ignored. Stress isn't weakness. It's warning, and like any warning, it's not meant to punish. It's meant to protect. So ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly rested? When was the last time you let go of being strong and just allowed yourself to feel? Because your brain, that beautiful silent organ, needs more than oxygen. It needs rest, stillness, space to breathe. And if it doesn't get that, one day it might ask for it in a way you can't ignore. He was 62, worked in logistics his whole life, didn't smoke, didn't drink. A little heavy around the middle, but nothing serious, or so he thought. He came to see me after something happened on his morning walk. He'd made it halfway down the block when his right foot started dragging, just a little. He thought maybe the sidewalk was uneven. He kept going. Then the street signs began to blur. And when he tried to call his wife, his speech slurred. Just for a moment. By the time he reached the clinic, he was walking fine, talking fine, smiling like nothing had happened. But something had. He didn't collapse, didn't lose consciousness, didn't need an ambulance, but inside, a tiny clot had moved, blocked blood flow in his brain for less than 10 minutes, and then dissolved. That was his warning. His first and last chance to change direction. We ran the scans. Blood vessels in his neck narrowing, blood pressure high, cholesterol high, and he hadn't seen a doctor in over a decade. I felt fine, he said quietly. I had no idea anything was wrong. And that's the part that stays with me. He had no pain, no headaches, no dramatic signs, just small things. Blurred vision, a moment of slurred speech, a foot that didn't lift right. It all passed. But it left a door wide open. That moment changed him. He started waking early, not for work, but to sit quietly by the window. He stopped skipping breakfast. He walked slower, not to rest, but to notice. He called his kids more, laughed more, stopped rushing through his life like it was some race to be won. He still came in every 6 months, pressure under control, cholesterol better, eyes clearer, not just in vision, but in spirit. And one day he said something I never forgot. Think that stroke might have saved my life. Not everyone gets that chance. Not everyone hears the whisper before the silence, but some do. Some listen. Some choose to return, not just to health, but to themselves. You don't need a hospital room or a doctor's warning to begin again. Sometimes all it takes is honesty. A stillness long enough to ask, is this how I want to keep living? Not just in routine, but in awareness, in gentleness, in care, because it's not just about avoiding a stroke. It's about the kind of life that never invites one to begin with. A life where you pause, where you nourish, where you soften the pace before your body demands it. It doesn't always start with numbness or slurred speech or a drooping smile. Sometimes it starts with something smaller, a word you forget, not once but twice. A strange fog in your thoughts, like your brain is half asleep. You open the fridge and forget why. You're in a conversation, and suddenly you're not sure what you were saying. You laugh it off. You say, I guess I'm getting old. But something inside knows this isn't just age. It feels different. Many strokes don't always knock. Sometimes they whisper from the hallway, days, even weeks before they arrive. A subtle imbalance. A misstep on the stairs, even though you've taken them for years. A strange heaviness in your right arm that comes and goes. Moments where your eyes don't focus quite right, as if the world takes half a second longer to sharpen. You blink. It clears, you keep going, but your brain, it remembers. I had a patient 47 years old, engineer, fit, young kids. No history of stroke in the family. He came in not because something felt wrong, but because his wife had noticed. "You're quieter lately," she said. "You forget words sometimes." He hadn't noticed, not really. Just moments of blankness. Fatigue that didn't go away. A strange sadness that hung around, even on good days. We ran tests. Silent high blood pressure. Narrowed vessels. He was on the edge. And didn't even know it. See, the brain doesn't break all at once. It frays, a little at a time. It shows up in your emotions. In your focus. In the way you react slower. Or feel more tired. Even after sleep. Mini stroke isn't always physical. Sometimes it starts in how you think, how you feel, how the world around you starts to seem just a bit off. But we're not taught to connect those dots. We separate the body from the mind. We call it brain fog. We blame work. We say, "I've just been stressed." And maybe you have. But if those moments come more often, linger longer, stack quietly on top of each other, that's not nothing. That's a shadow walking beside you. One that deserves your attention. The brain is like a map. When blood can't reach one area, even for a short time, you lose part of what lives there. Your balance, your memory, your words, your emotions. And when it happens in flashes, you feel it, but you can't explain it. That's what makes mini stroke so dangerous. Not the drama, but the subtlety. So if you find yourself forgetting more than usual, if you lose track of time more often, if you feel off in ways you can't describe, don't dismiss it. Don't wait for something bigger to prove you right. Your body doesn't lie. It just speaks a language most of us were never taught to understand. Learn to listen. Not when it shouts, but when it sighs. There was a time when we believed strokes belonged to the old. To those who'd already lived a long, full life. To gray hair. To wheelchairs. To the very end of the road. Not anymore. Now, it's showing up in people with backpacks. In gym memberships. In 32-year-olds who work late, skip meals, and survive on caffeine. It's not about age. It's about accumulation. He was 36, healthy on paper. Ran a small business, didn't drink, didn't smoke, but he lived in constant motion. 4 hours of sleep. Lunches eaten standing up. Stress that never left his shoulders, just moved deeper into his chest. The morning it happened, he was brushing his teeth, looked in the mirror, and one side of his face wasn't moving. It passed within 10 minutes. He thought maybe he slept wrong. He went to work. By evening, he couldn't speak clearly. He was lucky. It was just a mini stroke. That word, mini, is dangerous. It makes you think you've avoided something, but really, you've just seen the edge of the cliff. And if you keep walking the same path, you know where it leads. These days, the body breaks younger, not because it's weaker, but because we ask too much of it, too soon, too often, with too little rest in between. You scroll instead of sleep. You carry your worth in deadlines and inboxes and unread messages. You ignore the tightness in your chest. You call that headache normal. You think fatigue is just part of growing up, But at ISN single quotes D. Many strokes are showing up in people with no family history, no visible risk. Except one. They never stop, they never pause, never breathe. Never treat their body like something living, and slowly. The vessels in the brain pay the price. You might be 29 or 41, or somewhere in between. You might still feel invincible, but I've seen the look in a young man's eyes when he realizes he can't lift his arm, when the words come out wrong. When he reaches for a phone and forgets how to use it. It's a different kind of fear. The kind that doesn't understand how it got here. And the hardest part, there were warnings. He just didn't know how to read them. Because at that age, no one tells you that stroke could be waiting. That your sleepless nights, your silent pressure, your constant drive to be more, do more, prove more, could be silently tightening the wires inside your brain. Until one day, they snap. You don't have to live like that. You don't have to wait for your body to force you to stop. There's still time to choose a different rhythm. One where you don't confuse exhaustion with strength. Where you don't measure success in self-neglect. Where health isn't something you fix when it's broken, but something you guard every day, quietly, patiently, like something sacred. You're not too young. You're just early enough to still do something about it. Funny, isn't it? We spend years learning what's good for us. Wake up early, eat less, push harder, stay active, but no one tells you. There's a difference between care and control. Between nurturing your body and forcing it to obey. There's a man I knew. He prided himself on his discipline. Up at 4:30 every morning. Cold showers. Intermittent fasting. No sugar, no salt, no rest. He called it mental toughness. But there's something the brain doesn't respect. Rigidity. Because your vessels, they're not made of steel. They're soft. They stretch and swell with pressure. And when pressure never stops, even healthy pressure, something breaks. He collapsed at the gym. Not because he was lazy, but because he never listened. Some people skip breakfast because they read it burns fat, but their brain runs on glucose. And day after day, their mornings become cloudy, their hands shake. They snap at people they love, not because they're angry, but because their body is starving for balance. Others push their heart to run when their body is still healing from 4 hours of sleep. They confuse exhaustion with weakness and wear pain like a badge. But the brain remembers every skipped meal, every dehydrated hour, every time you forced movement when it needed rest. It adds up, not with loud alarms, but with quiet strain. Little tears in blood vessels. Tiny clots forming in silence. And here's the hardest part. People don't notice. Because these habits look strong, they post about them. They praise themselves for willpower. They say, I'm doing everything right. But the body doesn't care what's trending. It only knows rhythm. It only understands balance. And when balance is lost long enough, you pay for it in moments that feel like betrayal. A mini stroke doesn't wait for obvious mistakes. It waits for accumulation. Of all the good intentions that went too far. All the mornings you ignored the headache. All the nights you drank caffeine instead of sleeping. All the workouts you did to punish, not to heal. Being healthy isn't a performance. It's a conversation. You ask your body, are you okay? And you listen for the answer, even when it's inconvenient. You don't push past the whisper, just because it isn't the scream. So maybe today, you skip the fast and sit down for breakfast. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know when your brain needs fuel. Maybe you rest, not because you're lazy, but because rest is what builds strength. Maybe you stop measuring health by how much you deny yourself and start asking how much you're truly nourishing. That's the kind of habit that protects your brain. Not flashy, not loud, but steady, human, whole. You ever lose something right in front of you? Your keys, your glasses, that paper you swore was on the table. You look for it, frustrated, only to find it later, sitting exactly where it always was. It's strange how the mind can miss what's right before our eyes when we're too distracted to slow down. I once had a patient, 49 years old, 3 kids, running his own business, didn't smoke, didn't drink, told me he was too healthy to get sick. But he started forgetting little things, missing appointments, calling people the wrong names, blaming it on stress, and stress was plenty, until one morning, he couldn't remember how to button his shirt. He called me. His voice was shaking, but he still said, "I probably just need rest." But it wasn't fatigue. It was a warning, a mini stroke, quiet, almost invisible, slipping through his days like fog across a field. The body always speaks, but we learn to ignore its language. A flutter in the chest, just anxiety. Blurred vision, must be the screen. A stumble on the stairs. Maybe I stood too fast. But what if it wasn't? What if the brain had been whispering for weeks? What if the hands that dropped the coffee cup were asking for help? You see, the problem isn't the signs. It's our pace. We move too fast to notice the slowness creeping in. We fill our days so full that there's no room left to feel what's wrong. You wake up dizzy, but you drink coffee and rush out. You forget a word, but laugh it off as getting older. You feel your leg go weak for a second, but you shake it out and keep going. Because who has time to be sick? But time is exactly what a mini-stroke takes from you if you don't listen early enough. Not with sirens, not with pain, just with little slips. Moments that feel like nothing until they're everything. You don't need a panic button. You don't need to fear every headache, but you do need to pause. To ask, is this normal for me? Has this been happening more often? Is my body asking for care, and I've just been too busy to hear it? The man I told you about, he recovered. But it changed him. Now he writes things down. He keeps his mornings slower. He says no more often. He tells people he loves them because he forgot once. And it scared him more than anything. You don't have to wait for that. Not everyone gets a second chance. Some people forget a word and never remember language again. Some stumble once and never walk alone after. That's not drama. That's reality. When you live too fast to notice your brain falling behind. So maybe tonight you don't. Just brush off the heaviness. Maybe you sit with it. Maybe you call someone. Maybe you finally make that appointment, not because you're scared, but because you're paying attention, and paying attention is what saves your life. There's a kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. You lie down. You close your eyes, but your mind doesn't settle. It hums quietly at first, then louder. The emails, the bills, the words you didn't say today, the things you wish you hadn't. You roll over, stare at the ceiling, and before you know it, it's 2 a.m. again. You tell yourself, I'll catch up on sleep this weekend. But the weekend comes, and you're still on alert, still scanning, still tense, and over time that becomes normal. A body always on. A brain that never rests. You function, you smile, you show up. But inside, something's wearing thin. I've seen it too many times. People who seem fine on the outside, sharp, responsible, busy. But inside, their nervous system is stuck in overdrive. It shows up in ways they don't expect: blurred vision, random headaches, sudden mood swings, forgetting why they walked into a room. Or worse, a strange numbness in the hand that comes and goes. They think it's the coffee, or just getting older. But sometimes, it's the brain crying out for stillness. The brain is like a garden. It needs rest, not just to survive, but to reset. Without sleep, the brain doesn't clear out waste, doesn't repair, doesn't balance, and over months, even years, tiny damages pile up. Connections fade. Blood flow slows. That's how a seemingly healthy person ends up with a mini stroke. Not because of one bad day, but because of hundreds of restless nights they called normal. I had a patient once, late 50s, worked in finance, said he hadn't slept well in a decade. He laughed when I asked if he was tired. I live tired, he said. Until one morning, he couldn't remember his own address. Stress isn't just a feeling. It's physical. It tightens arteries. It raises blood pressure. It weakens memory. It confuses the signals between brain and body. And when you combine chronic stress with poor sleep, it's like running a machine without oil. It keeps going until it doesn't. But here's what no one tells you. You don't need to collapse to start caring. You don't have to wait for a hospital bed to rest. You can begin tonight, not with perfect sleep, not with silence, but with permission. Permission to shut the laptop even if there's work left. To breathe, not scroll. To stretch your back. To place a hand on your chest and simply feel it beating. That rhythm? It's been carrying you all these years. It deserves a little stillness. You've been strong long enough. Maybe now you learn to be soft. Soft with your nerves. Soft with your mind. Soft with your body that's been holding so much for so long. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing isn't what you feel. It's what you never let yourself feel at all. There was a man I once knew. Quiet, steady, the kind of person everyone leaned on. He worked long hours, took care of his family, didn't complain, didn't rest. They said he was strong. And he was, but even strong people crack, just very quietly. He didn't collapse, didn't faint, didn't scream for help. One morning, he just sat at the edge of his bed and couldn't remember how to stand, not because his legs were weak, but because his mind was somewhere else. He said it felt like a fog, thick, slow, like he was moving through water. The next week, he forgot his neighbor's name. Then the week after, his right hand trembled when he tried to shave. He thought it was stress, or age, or maybe the weather. It wasn't. The scans showed he'd had a transient ischemic attack, a TIA, a mini stroke. No warning, no big moment. Just small slips no one noticed, not even him, until it was too loud to ignore. But here's what I remember most. It wasn't the hospital. It wasn't the diagnosis. It was the morning after he was discharged. He told me. I opened the window, and for the first time in years, I heard birds. He smiled when he said it, like it shocked him, because before that, his mornings were all noise, emails, deadlines, traffic, news, worry. But that morning, he sat, he breathed, he listened, and something shifted. He didn't become a different man overnight. He still worked, still worried, still had bills and plans, but now, he walked every evening just to feel the sidewalk under his feet. He started breakfast with something warm, not just coffee. And when he felt tired, he didn't push harder. He paused. That's the thing about mini strokes. They whisper. They don't always take. But they leave a mark, a chance, a moment. A door, just barely open. And for those who notice in time, that door can lead somewhere better. Not louder. Not faster. But softer. Sometimes he'd tell me, I used to think rest was lazy. Then he'd shake his head and say, now I know, it's survival. I don't share this to scare you. I share it because some of you have already felt the fog, already missed the name, already dropped the key, already sat on the edge of your bed wondering why everything feels just a little off, and maybe you're still calling it nothing. But what if it isn't? What if it's your first chance to listen? Not because you're broken, but because you've been too strong for too long. And now, your body is asking for something gentler. Not a fix, just a breath. Some people don't fall apart because they don't allow themselves to. They keep going, even when they're exhausted, even when their hands shake and their vision blurs, even when the words don't come out right. They say things like, I'm just tired, it's nothing, there's too much to do. And then they keep moving. They're the ones everyone else leans on. They pay the bills. They drive to appointments. They fix what's broken. They don't ask for help because they've always been the strong one. But here's something no one tells them. Even strong walls crack when the pressure never stops. Mini strokes don't always look like emergencies. They look like a missed step, a dropped glass, a sentence you can't finish, a silence you can't explain. And for someone who's always in control, those small moments can feel like betrayal. So they hide it. They push through. They don't want to worry anyone, but the body, it remembers. There was a woman I once spoke with. Mother of 3, worked 2 jobs. Never missed a school play. One morning, she forgot where she parked, not just the spot, the entire street. Later, she couldn't hold a fork steady. Still, she told herself, it's stress. I'll sleep more next week. But next week never came. Because her body chose its own moment. The scans showed a small stroke, likely several. Over time, silent, stacked, accumulating. When she finally sat down with me, she didn't cry. She just said, I thought taking care of everyone meant ignoring myself. Then she looked down and whispered, but I forgot, I'm someone too. That stayed with me, because I've met so many like her, like you. People who mean well, who love deeply, who sacrifice, but who slowly vanish inside. Their responsibilities. And their bodies carry the cost. So if you've been forgetting words, if your hand goes numb sometimes, if you've been feeling a strange pressure in your head that comes and goes, don't brush it off. Not because you're weak, but because you matter. You can't hold everything forever. Not without holding yourself too. Start small. Notice your breath. Drink water before coffee. Rest without guilt. Say no, even if no one understands, because no one will thank you for pushing until you collapse, but they will miss you if you do. And maybe the first step isn't changing everything. Maybe it's just finally saying out loud, I need care too, not in a hospital, not after a scare, but now, while there's still time to listen before the body shouts. It doesn't always start with pain or numbness or collapse. Sometimes it starts with a sentence that just won't come out right. You know what you want to say. It's there, on the tip of your tongue. You see the word. You feel it, but then something goes missing. The word doesn't land. The sound doesn't match the thought. So you pause. You smile it off. You say, sorry, I'm just tired. But tired people don't suddenly forget their children's names. They don't say table when they meant window. They don't stop mid-sentence and stare at the floor, wondering what just happened. The brain is a quiet machine. It speaks through patterns, connections, tiny rivers of meaning moving faster than you can think, but a mini-stroke, even the smallest one, can interrupt that flow, not permanently, not always noticeably, but just enough to leave you confused. I once spoke to a retired teacher. She spent decades explaining things to others. Language was her gift, her pride. But then, during breakfast one day, she asked her husband to pass the circle box. She meant the cereal. She laughed. He laughed, but later that day, she called a book a plate. And her husband stopped laughing. A few tests later, the truth came quietly, a series of tiny strokes, hidden beneath years of caring for others and ignoring herself. She told me, it wasn't that I didn't care. I just didn't want to believe it was something real. That's how it often is. We confuse denial with strength. We call it being busy. We say, I just need to rest. But sometimes the body whispers before it screams. And language, our oldest tool, our most human instinct, is one of the first things to go. So, if the words feel heavy, if your tongue moves slower than your thoughts, if you've been saying things you don't remember choosing, listen, not with fear, but with care, because the brain doesn't break all at once. It fades like twilight, quiet, almost gentle. And that's what makes it dangerous. The people around you may not notice. They'll think you're distracted, in a hurry, forgetful. But you'll know, you'll feel the shift, the misfire, the delay. It's not always a fluke. Sometimes it's a flare, a sign, a soft knock from a body trying to be heard. And the gift of listening, truly listening, might be what saves you. You don't need to panic. You don't need to rush. But you do need to notice. And honor the noticing. Because behind every sentence that almost didn't come out is a body asking, are you paying attention now? You wrap your hands around a warm mug. Steam rises. The tea is hot, but your fingers still feel cold. Not just cold, dull. Like they've forgotten how to feel heat. You stretch them out. Rub your palms together. Wait, but it doesn't go away, sometimes. It's your foot, just one. It drags a little when you walk, like it's not quite yours. You tell yourself it's poor circulation. Or maybe you've been sitting too long. You laugh. Change positions, move on, but the cold comes back. Not sharp, not painful. Just there, like a light left on in the next room. I've seen this look before. The quiet discomfort of someone who knows something isn't right, but doesn't want to say it out loud. They'll say, it's probably just bad weather. Or, I think I slept funny. Maybe, but the truth? The body doesn't lose heat in just one hand. It doesn't forget feeling on only one side. A mini-stroke isn't always dramatic. It doesn't always drop you to the floor. Sometimes it slips into the spaces between your routines, takes your left hand for just a moment, numbs it, then walks away before anyone notices. There was a man I once met, a retired electrician, worked with wires for 40 years. His hands were everything. One winter morning, he told me he couldn't feel the wires anymore. Said it felt like he was holding them through a glove he didn't wear. A week later, he tried to button his shirt, and it took him nearly 15 minutes. He thought it was arthritis, old age, but scans showed a trail of tiny, silent strokes working their way down his right side. Here's the thing about the body. It always whispers before it breaks. The left side moves slower, The foot drags slightly. The hand forgets how to grip a spoon. The cold lingers even when it's warm outside. You don't need to be afraid. You don't need to search for signs in every ache or numbness. But you do need to notice when your body behaves like a stranger, because when blood stops flowing to even the smallest part of your brain, it's like shutting off power to a single streetlight in a city. You may not notice at first, but if another one goes, and another, eventually you'll be walking in the dark dot. So if your fingers go cold and never warm up, if your steps feel uneven though the ground is flat, if your own body feels just slightly off, you don't have to panic. You just have to pause long enough to pay attention. Not all cold is harmless. Not all numbness is fatigue. And not all signs announce themselves loudly. Sometimes they come like winter does, slow, creeping, quiet, until you look outside and everything is covered in frost. You brush your teeth, stare into the mirror, and something doesn't look quite right. Not your face, that's the same, but the way you're holding the toothbrush, the tilt of your head, the way your left hand feels just a little off, slower, maybe, number maybe. You chalk it up to sleep, or age, or stress. You always have an excuse, because to admit the truth would mean you're no longer sure who you are inside that body. I've met people like that. They come in after a fall or a scare, and they say things like, "Doc, I just haven't felt like myself lately." Not in a dramatic way. Not loud, just quiet. Almost embarrassed. Like they're mourning something they haven't lost yet, but can feel slipping away. And here's the part that stays with me. They knew. Long before anything showed up on a scan. Long before the EA visit. They knew, somewhere inside. They noticed the way their signature looked different. They noticed they were bumping into the doorframe more often. They noticed they were forgetting. Not just names, but how to speak them. But no one wants to be the one who cries wolf, so they say nothing. They carry on. And by the time they come to see me, it's no longer Minnie. That's the strange thing about these moments. Your body whispers. It never shouts. It's like walking into your childhood home after decades. Everything is still there, but something feels off, like you're a visitor. Like you're wearing a version of yourself that doesn't quite fit. That's what a mini stroke can feel like. Not pain, not collapse. Just foreignness, disconnection. A small betrayal of who you thought you were. You forget the name of your neighbor. You pour water into the cereal. You try to type and the letters come out wrong. Not once, but often, people joke, "I'm getting old." But deep down, they're scared, because it's not age they feel. It's something else. Something creeping. Something silent. And here's the truth I want you to hold on to. The body rarely lies. It just speaks a quieter language than we're used to listening for. So if you feel like a stranger to yourself, if your hands forget things they used to, no, if your mouth can't find words it once spoke fluently, don't brush it off. Don't wait for the drama. Most people don't collapse. They drift slowly, quietly, until one day they can't come back. So maybe you're sitting there now, in the quiet of your kitchen, morning light crawling through the blinds, half a cup of coffee cooling beside you, and you're thinking back to the time you forgot your route home, to the moment your hand trembled holding a fork, to the strange stillness in your face in that one photo. You didn't talk about it. You barely let yourself think about it. But now, it's here, in front of you. This quiet truth you've always known. Something hasn't felt quite right, and maybe you're scared. That's okay. Fear isn't the enemy. Ignoring it is. You don't have to fix everything today. You don't need to change your whole life overnight. But you do need to pause, to listen, to look at your body not with judgment, but with gentleness. Like an old friend you haven't seen in a long time. You might be tired of advice, tired of warnings, tired of the world shouting at you to be better or faster or stronger. That's not what this is. This is simpler and quieter. It's about noticing. Noticing when your hands feel off. Noticing when your words falter. Noticing when the world tilts ever so slightly, and you don't know why. And then running from it. You get to choose. Not out of fear, but out of care. Out of knowing that your life, the one you're living right now, still has time. Time to shift, to rest, to ask for help, to walk into a clinic before it becomes an ambulance. Time to become familiar with yourself again, not because someone told you to change, not because of some resolution or deadline, but because, deep down, you know, you're not ready to lose yourself yet. And that quiet knowing, that's where it all begins. If this spoke to you, pass it on, not with urgency, but with love. Someone out there is still living too fast, still drifting, still waiting for the loud signs. But now you know, the important ones are always quiet.